Okay, so welcome to the bouncing ball tutorial in Flipbook. Okay, so the first thing that I always do is click on the toolbox, get our pencil size to about 3, and our eraser make it about 7. That gives us a nice clean line and a nice big eraser. Okay, so pick on Options, then Lightbox Options, hit Previous and Next for in-betweening, click on Straight Ahead, make the minimum density 5, max about 35, hit Apply, and OK. Okay, so the next thing that I want to do is just make sure we're in Drawing Tool, great. Okay, is pick on the first frame of the BG, and then go to File and import in a still. Now this is going to be like our background, so pick on the BG BMP, hit on Import, and then Done. Okay, so we've got a background frame there. So now we're ready to go and start drawing our first frame of the bouncing ball. So I pick on the pencil, click on Ellipse, and then go ahead and draw a rough size for our actual bouncing ball. Okay, now click back on Free for freehand, and let's rough this up a little bit. I do a kind of clean one first, just to give us a nice size ball, and then rough it up a bit, to make it a bit more freehand looking, so it's nice and rough. Okay, so hitting the arrow keys up and down allows you to jump from frame to frame. Okay, and there's a little ghosted image there, for going straight ahead with our animation. Okay, this is straight ahead animation, but it's also pose to pose. So we did frame 1, which is the highest point of the bouncing ball. Now we're going to do the next most important frame, which is the squash position. This is the very bottom key frame of our bouncing ball. So it's going to go from there to there. Okay, and then what we're going to do is just kind of clean this squash position up. And what we're trying to do is retain volume a little bit. Even though it's making impact with the ground and it's squashing, we're exaggerating it. We just want to make sure that it kind of retains the volume of the original bouncing ball. Okay, so that's cool. So we'll just flip those frames. Okay, so now pick on the very first frame and hit Copy, and go to frame 3 and hit Paste. Now this is going to complete our cycle, so it's going to go from the top to the bottom, back up to the top. Okay, so we just use the arrow keys to flip those. Now let's do a quick timing on these. Now I'm just going to add 12 frames to each of these poses. Okay, so it's going to go from 1, add 12 to 13, and then go to 25. When 12 plus 13 is 25, and then frame 25 is basically the same as frame 1, so that completes our cycle. Okay, so the next most important frame will be our stretch frame. So go up to Options and go Lightbox Options. Now we're doing in-betweening. Okay, so we're basically going to want to see our top position and our bottom position, and this will be the stretch frame. This is kind of like a contact frame, because I'm basically doing this as contacting the actual line of the background. Okay, and what we're doing is indicating some elasticity in the ball. So we're doing a normal size to a stretch frame to a squash frame, and then the next most important frame, which we're going to do at frame 14, is the stretch on the way up. Now I'm exaggerating this, just to kind of prove a point, okay, that you can actually really go ahead, like in 2D, exaggerate it, have some fun with it, and then later on we can pull it back if it feels like it's too much. Okay, so let's clean that up a little bit. Cool. So let's draw a timing chart to indicate our spacing between frame 1 and frame 12, our top position and bottom position. So what we're doing is going to do halfways between the top position and the bottom position. This is indicating a slow out of the top position into the bottom position. Okay, this is indicating our spacing, but it's also indicating our timing. Okay, so between 12 and 1, we're basically going to put the drawing at frame 11 halfway between the two drawings. Okay, this is going to be a slow out of the top position. Okay, so let's keep drawing this ball here. Let's see if I can figure out. Okay, so let's go to frame 10. Okay, now we're going to do this a halfway position again. Okay, so the drawings are starting to get closer together, indicating that these drawings are going to be slower at the top and faster at the bottom. Okay, as we play it at 24 frames per second. Okay, so we're going to go halfway again. Okay, frame 9. So the spacing is starting to get closer in the top position. Okay, frame 8. again, we're going to go closer. Let's go halfway again, slowing out of this top position. Okay. Frame 7, same thing. We're going to go halfway again. So you can see now that we're really getting closer and closer to that top position there at frame 1. Now I'm doing this to prove a point because you know, when you're first learning animation, it's really important to get the grasp of timing and spacing right off the bat, okay? Because this is everything in animation is all about timing and spacing. That's everything that you can do in animation has to have a certain amount of timing and a certain amount of spacing, okay? So if you can grasp the concept that drawings that are placed closer together are slower than drawings that are spaced further apart, then you're ahead of the game, okay? So let's keep going. Frame 5, again, we're almost doing a trace back here, but it's still a halfway point, okay? So we're still basically keeping this ball slightly moving, okay, where it's almost going to come to a held pose at frame 1, okay? Frame 4, we're almost doing a trace back here. So these drawings are obviously going to play slower than the ones that are near the bottom where the stretch frame is, because they're spaced closer together. They're on top of each other. So when you're playing these frames 24 frames per second, it's going to play slower than those ones that are at the bottom that are spaced further apart. Okay? So let's go ahead and play like just one half of the cycle. So this is basically the ball falling. You can feel the gravity pulling it towards the ground. Okay? So now let's go ahead and do the spacing on the way back up. So at frame 15, it's going to be the same thing as on the way down. We're going to do a halfway mark on frame 14, the stretch pose on the way up, and 25, which is the same as 1, and do a halfway position where the ball is starting to come back into its normal size, its normal shape. Okay, we're still kind of in-betweening up into this top position. So instead of slowing out of the top position, now we're going to be slowing in to the top position because we're going the opposite way. Okay, so it's slow in and slow out of the top position. So we're halfway point. Go ahead, draw the ball, getting closer and closer to that top position, but still halfway marks. Okay, 17, the same thing. Halfway point. Okay, great. 18. Now this is going to be too slow. Okay, so we're doing this as a point just to kind of show flipbook and how to erase things and retime things. So I'm starting this as being a little bit too slow as a bouncing ball, and then we'll kind of retime it into what it should look like. Okay. So let's go at 19. Go ahead and in between it. Kind of proves the point about, you know, timing and spacing. You know, to really show that this is basically going to feel like the ball is going to come up, stop, and then start to come down again. Okay. So frame 20. Go ahead, in between it, straight ahead. Okay, great. Frame 21, we're basically doing a trace back now. Frame 22. So our cycle is going to go from 1, it's going to hit down at frame 13, and then it's going to come back up to 25, which is the same as frame 1. So we're going to do, this is basically going to be 1 second of animation that we're going to cycle again and again and again. So every second that you see up on the screen is basically 24 frames of posed animation. Okay? So you can feel that it's coming up, stopping, and then dropping down. Okay, so let's go ahead and start retiming this. Let's delete the ones that are getting too close, that are almost like a hell frame. So I'm just picking on frame 3 and frame 4 and deleting those frames, and then we'll delete the ones on the other side too, because it's just too slow. Okay, so let's go ahead and pick on 20 and delete on that. 23, same thing. Let's delete that. We'll probably move 21. Click on that and move it up to 20. Okay. Probably want to, let's see how that feels. It's getting better. It's starting to get a little bit more fluid. But let's go ahead and delete 2. Okay. So now our frames go from 1 to 5, which is now the new frame 2. And that's starting to feel a lot better. But still just slightly too slow. Okay. Okay, it's getting better. Okay, not too bad, but it still feels just a little bit too slow. I'd say maybe deleting another 2 keyframes. Let's delete frame 5. Let's go ahead and delete that. Okay, slowing out, slowing back in. Okay, let's go ahead and delete 17 too. Okay. So let's reorganize. This little bar down here basically tells us where we want the cycle to end. Okay, that's feeling a lot better. Okay, so I just did export of that as a little movie just to see what the timing would be. So let's try and experiment a few things here. So, you know, let's say like that stretch position was a little bit too broad for the director's taste. So let's go ahead and make it a less stretched position. Okay, on the way down and then on the way back up as well. Okay. So I'm taking it off the ground because I don't want too many drawings where it's actually contacting the ground. Alright, so let's delete the stretch on the way back up as well. Okay, making it a little less stretched. Okay, maybe we'll add a frame after frame 9. And we'll do an in-between here where we're favoring the squashed position, where it's still contacting the ground, but sort of coming out of that position. So we're almost going back to a normal position and then going into a stretch position at frame 11. Let's see what that feels like. Just to get a little bit extra fluidity out of the ball. Okay, that actually feels pretty good. Okay, cool. So let's try and do some overlapping action on this ball, okay? So let's add maybe like some pigtails to this ball and show some straight ahead animation, but also some overlap and follow through on this, okay? So usually what I would do in 2D is get the performance working and then go ahead and straight ahead the actual overlap, alright? So what you do is get your first position at the top and get like your default pose. And then as the ball is dropping, connect those to the ball. We'll start dragging from the position that you came from. Okay? So let's go ahead and start straight aheading all this. Okay? So go ahead and do that part right there. So it's dragging from the position that it came from. So we're slowing out of that top position again. Okay? And you've got to constantly be flipping from where you came from. Alright, so this is the guts of straight ahead animation right now. So again, it's connected near the center of the ball, so it's dragging down, okay, but it's still going to be pointing in the direction that it came from. Okay, so let's keep going. Okay. Let's go ahead, drag. Still connected to the center of the ball. Okay. So you can start to feel the ball pulling the pigtails down. Okay. So we're still just kind of on the way down here. Okay. Starting to really drag down, but still pointing towards where it came from, where the tip is. Okay, cool. So still kind of flipping from where it came from, and then we're almost getting a straight right here, but it's still pointing to where it came from. So we're trying to retain the length of the pigtails right here, okay? But we're just kind of dropping it down, pointing to where it came from. Okay, here's where it's going to start to bend, okay? We're going to be going the opposite direction to the way it was actually defaulted, okay? So we've gone now past that position, but it's now stretching it down, okay? Now it's dragging way, way back, and right before it hits for that squash position, okay? So it's still dragging from the way it came from because the ball is dragging down, so the pigtails have got to go down. Okay, now here's where it's going to start to bend and overlap. So the ball is contacted with the ground here, causing an effect. Now the pigtails are still on the way down, but the actual ball is going to start to go on its way back up on the very next frame. So we're going to start to see some drag and some overlap in there. Okay, sort of like an S position. Okay, so the base of the pigtails are starting to go up. Now the tip of the pigtail still has to overlap. It's still on its way down, so we've got an overlapping action happen right there. So it's like the pigtails are being dragged at a separate timing to the bouncing ball's timing. Okay, so it's starting to bend the opposite way. Okay, it's starting to come up. And still, the pigtails are still on the way down, still following through with their position, because we don't want to hit any sort of invisible wall. It can hit the ground, but it can't actually hit mid-air and start going the opposite way. Okay, so now we start to drag it up. Okay, the pigtails are still dragging down, but the bouncing ball is actually going up at this point. Okay, still pointing from where they came from on the previous frames. But following a nice little arc, I mean, that's really what you're trying to do here, is let them follow an arc. Okay? And a good idea is to kind of like film yourself, you know, just kind of like holding a piece of string and just kind of overlapping it backwards and forwards or up and down and seeing what that effect is. Now, although, you know, animation is like an exaggeration of real life, it's a caricature of real life, but it's good to kind of feel the flow, you know, feel that kind of arc and see what's actually happening there. Okay, so still, let's kind of drag that pigtail backwards. Okay. Now, I don't actually have a CG pigtail, but we're going to definitely bring this bouncing ball into Maya and do a polished version of a squash and stretch with some rotation on it. Okay, so let's go ahead and copy that position to the end position, so we've got something to go from. Okay, so there's the pigtails right there. Okay, so now they're going to start to, it's starting to slow down, and it's going to start to change direction, so the pigtails can now catch up with the ball. Okay, we're slowing down, and we're going to try and work into that first position. Cycles are always difficult because you're trying to get the pigtails overlapping into that first position so it can actually play as a cycle. Okay, so we're just going to rough this in very, very quickly just to get an idea of where the pigtails should be, where you think they should be, and then we can rework this frame here. Just make sure that it in-betweens nicely into that first pose again. And then we'll make sure that the cycle works on the way up into on the way down. Okay, so let's just kind of rough that in there, and rough this in here, just to kind of get an idea to see if it's actually going to work. Okay, the spacing on that one's a little bit off. Okay, so I'm just going to rework that pose right there. So let's just go ahead and play this just to see if that line of action is working. Okay, so the overlap is actually working quite well, so I'm just going to finish this one off. Okay, so let's go ahead and finish off this pigtail here. Okay. Okay, great. So there's the overlapping action working on the bouncing ball in Flipbook. So let's go ahead and pick both columns in Flipbook. Go ahead and export stills. We're going to change that to frame 1 to 18. Composite the frames. Maintain aspect ratio, scale BG. And we'll call it the bouncing ball. And make sure that we save them into the bouncing ball BMPs.